Hi, friends, it's Sarah, the Fat Culture Critic. So, in the past, I've made several videos thinking through big ideas through a scene in media. I began with hope, then joy, then forgiveness. And I was sort of invited others to make videos in response and think through these ideas as well. And this is another sort of in those lines, although this one is a little different because this time, instead of a big idea, I have a specific question. I've always approached these as a way to think about these ideas through the work we do, those of us who sort of try to advocate or educate or in some way work for a more socially just kind of space, that big sort of nebulous thing that sometimes gets called on the left. And that's the lens through which I've looked at joy and hope and forgiveness. And so this is even more specifically for folks working in that sort of space because the question is, why do we fight or why do we work? I'm releasing this on Labor Day, and so the idea of sort of work is to the forefront of the mind. But like, why do we do this? Why do we advocate, educate, agitate? And I say we, but really the thing about the why is it's gonna be a bit different for everyone. We tend to have a broad idea of what we're working against, but it can be really useful to think through why we are doing it. And so I'm going to talk about my why, and I invite you to think through your why, to try and spend some time connecting. And if you feel inspired, there'll be a playlist and I'll keep adding to it as people send me videos. But whether you're inspired to make a video or not, I hope you will take some time to try and connect to your why. So here, this is going to be my why. For me, it always comes back to story. And so if I'm going to tell you my why, I'm going to start by talking about a story. This story. Want to sing out, sing out. Harold and Maude is a 1971 film written by Colin Higgins and directed by Hal Ashby. It's the story of Harold, a depressed, lonely man living with his totally self-involved, kind of abusive mother. And Harold meets Maude, a marvelous, eccentric woman weeks away from her 80th birthday. And they form a fast friendship that blossoms into love as Maude teaches Harold her love for life. With a different writer or actor or made at a different time, this might have been trite. We know they've tried, many have tried to recapture it and never quite, never achieved. Harold and Maude, because Ruth Gordon's Maude has a sincerity that is just captivating, and the filmmaking is so sincere. And though I don't want to spoil the story, Maude's love for life is a conscious choice made by someone who knows how dark the world can be and still chooses love.
You sure have a way with people.
Well, they're my species.
And one of the scenes early in the film, as their friendship is growing, Maude takes Harold to a plant nursery and they talk about what flowers they would want to be reincarnated as. She wants to be a sunflower. And Harold is so withdrawn from life, he doesn't really know how to answer. And he sort of says, I don't know, one of these, I suppose, pointing to a field of daisies, because they're all alike.
Oh, but they're not. Look, see, some are smaller, some are fatter, some grow to the left, some to the right. Some even have lost some petals, all kinds of observable differences.
And much of the world's problems comes from people who are like the daisies, each a little different, each their own unique thing, allowing themselves to be treated as if they are all the same. And then we get a hard cut from the field of daisies to a field of headstones in a military cemetery because subtlety.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
Did I mention this was made in 1971 by hippie, like by this guy? And it's a really simple idea. And it's been mocked a million times as sort of like people aren't special snowflakes, but also we are. The real truth is the humans, and not just humans, but all of nature is an ever evolving, ever diverse profusion of variety. The only constant is change. The only normal is variation. And yet we have this culture that perpetually sees variation as deviation, as there being one norm, one standard that all beings must be, and all humans who are not that, who live differently, who love differently, who look different, who have different abilities, all are seen as less, as less human. The variation becomes deviation, and deviation becomes shame. Shame is the mechanism in which each person feels that their difference, their variation, is deviation, is wrong. It is a powerful thing, shame, and it is a tool of oppression. Because to be ashamed of who you are, of how you live, of how you look, shame keeps people isolated, small, quiet. And shame teaches people to stay in their place, to accept what they're offered. And it teaches people to shame others, to keep them in place, small and isolated. And so people do the work of power themselves to hold one another into smaller and smaller places, into wanting less and less. Psychology professor Devin Price, in his book, Unlearning Shame, talks about this particularly systemic shame that works on a threefold system: to personal shame that keeps one's self small and isolated and keeps marginalized people ashamed of the thing that marginalizes them. Each thing that is one's own variation into something that one must overcome or heroically live with, or be ashamed that one cannot heroically overcome, even though the system is set up to make it not overcomable. And then there is interpersonal shame, by which we shame one another and are taught to hold each other small, the tall poppy, the crab in the bucket. And then the third part he identifies as global shame, and the way in which this isolating, individualizing mechanism of shame makes us feel that the world itself is doomed and sad and dark. I highly recommend Dr. Price's book, and I want to delve more into it in a longer video at some point. But I come back to Maud's line about how
I feel that much of the world's sorrow comes from people who are this, yet allow themselves to be treated as that.
people who are wonderful variations, their own unique kind of daisy, allowing themselves to be treated as just another box. And what Maud does is invite us to look at the ordinary beauty of people, of ourselves. Because what is the answer to shame but pride and acceptance? Radical acceptance, beginning with oneself and fighting for acceptance in the world, for oneself and for each other. Acceptance in all our quirks and weird oddnesses, all our queerness. To embrace the beauty of human variety. And that's where I find my why I advocate for better, more authentic representation, better stories, because we can better accept one another when we can better see one another. We can better accept ourselves when we're better able to see ourselves. And we can have better stories when we tell our own stories and tell each other our stories. And it's why I speak up for fat people and for queer people and disabled people, and why I will always speak against shame. Because if we can work to accept ourselves and one another as we are, we can build solidarity. If we refuse the lie that there is any one person who is standard, that any person is more of a person than another person, if we refuse that lie, we are on a path to a better world. Or at least in that moment, every time we refuse that lie, we have made the world in that moment a little better, a little less dark. And that is always worth fighting for. That is my little piece on my why. I'm curious, what is yours? So, those are my thoughts. Thank you for listening. I will create a playlist for any videos that other people have in response to this with their whys, and hopefully we can get a bit of a conversation going and get each other thinking about stuff. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons, whose names you should be seeing just now. And if you'd like to join them, you know how to do that. And if you want to follow me, the links are in the doobly-doo. While I have your attention, if you, like me, are concerned about what's happening in Gaza, there are some links here to give what you can, whether it's time, attention, or money, to help the people who are suffering.